let's get started. So I don't think this presentation will take up the whole time. So welcome. I'm happy to answer questions and, maybe have a bit of a discussion after this. Or we can even adjourn early and head to lunch. So I think about 30 minutes worth of tips and tricks in Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager. I'm also really interested to hear what you all are doing, since a lot of you have Google Tag Manager running too. Okay. Awesome. So hello and welcome to Tips for Getting Data on Your Site's Long Content. So this is me. You already see me, but then you have another photo of me. I run a very small agency. It's boutique. That does basically what we're going to talk about today. I work specifically with nonprofit and government clients. I have a lot of research clients, and I help them audit their Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager, advertising tracking setups, fix any issues that I find, help them set up things so they can get the data they need. And I do a lot of training, a lot of dashboard building, some analysis work. So kind of from beginning to end on the data side. So a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today, this is stuff that I do regularly for clients. A lot of my clients are in Drupal and Drupal government websites. So I'm happy to answer any questions for ideas that you might have that you want to implement. I'm just happy to speak to what I've seen or been able to do. So first, I want to make sure we're on the same page about what we're talking about when I say long content. So obviously, short form content is all the rage in the news right now, in social media apps. I personally finally got on TikTok because I felt like, all right, I need to know what's going on there because everyone's talking about it all the time. I guess as I'm getting older, I guess I'm becoming a later adopter. But in the media would make you think like the entire content world is all 30-second videos and tweets and Instagram posts. But working for the government or for research organizations, we know very well that that's not true, that there's a lot of content out there that's still, I got this from the FTC website, there's still a lot of long form case studies or case reports like this one, a lot of blog posts or long articles on the web like this one, or white papers and research out there like this one. So I consider all of these things to be long content. So anything that's very content heavy, so it has a lot of text, body, anything from a lengthy blog post to a full on 70-page research report. One thing we are not going to cover today, I'm sorry everybody if this is what you're hoping for, we are not going to talk about PDFs. Honestly, all of the tips and tricks I put together here will not work on PDFs, which is something you might already be very well aware of. I know that a lot of sites still are uploading PDFs. Some of them are my clients. And none of this is going to work on that because those aren't actual web pages. They're just documents uploaded to the internet. So if all of your research that, your organization, your research and reports that you're producing are PDFs, and you want to do more with tracking them, I'm sorry, you're really going to have to figure out how to get that content into an actual web page, and then you'll be able to implement all this stuff. Because with a PDF, basically all you can see is just someone viewing or downloading it. This cold won't go away. Okay, cool. Awesome. So it seems like everybody has Google Tag Manager, which makes me think that this is a fairly sophisticated crowd, but I always have this slide in here because I get this response from Oh, this is miserable. It was my first time being sick since COVID, and man, I don't know, it's been rough. Okay. I get this response from a lot of clients or people, when I do talks where they say, like, oh, I went into the back end of, went into Drupal and I added my Google Analytics ID number to the field back there, and now it's tracking. And I get, some reports, and isn't that it? And I have to say that, there is way more to Google Analytics, especially if you implement Google Tag Manager, than just what you get out of the box. Basically, if you're just installing your Google Analytics code in Drupal and not using Google Tag Manager, when it comes to content, you're basically just getting your page view reports. This is all that you get out of the box. Oh, I'm sorry, everybody. Let me take a drink of water. This is something that's really changing as Google really forces everyone to move over to Google Analytics 4. There's definitely increased emphasis on tracking things beyond page views and having to set up events. So Google's word for actions on the site. So all of this is done. So whether you're on Google Analytics 4 or the older version, Universal Analytics, all the things I'm going to talk about today are basically done through event tracking. Unless I tell you otherwise. There's actually a couple of things in here that aren't. So this is all stuff that you have to set up after you get Google Analytics, and it doesn't come automatically with the program. All right, let me pause for a voice rest a second. All right. So when it comes to content, Google Analytics out of the box doesn't give us everything that we need. Right? You can see how many people viewed a particular report in a time period. But it's helpful, but it's not that helpful. We're missing knowing about whether anybody is actually reading this. Okay, so they viewed it. Let me hold that thought for a second. They viewed it, but did they read half of the report? Did they read the whole report? We don't know. We can look at time on site, but honestly, average session duration, average time on page, honestly, that often can be inaccurate, because if people are coming directly to that page and then they are leaving without interacting with your page in any other way, Google doesn't know how much time they actually spent on the page, because it needs a timestamp. It needs a second interaction to measure the difference between the two. So if someone's just coming to your page, looking at it for a bit, not doing anything else, and then leaving, it's like a big mystery to Google how much time they spent on there, because there's no second interaction for it to calculate against. Okay. If you have more questions about that, I can answer that later. So honestly, I still get a lot of client requests for information about, how long are people spending with this content? And that is really not a very accurate accurate measure, especially if people are coming to your content directly rather than navigating through the site in another way. Okay. Oh my goodness. All right. Sorry. Okay, number 2. Another thing that Google Analytics doesn't answer out of the box is that you probably want to look at your content in by taxonomy or metadata. Google Analytics only allows you to look at it by what's the title of the page, what's the URL. But when you have a lot of content, you probably have it organized by topic or category or author or program, all these different ways of organizing content. And there's definitely a way to get this, which I'll go through, but this is not something that comes out of the box. And number 3, another thing that you can use Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager for, that requires a little bit of setup, is finding out what other content people are looking for that wasn't included here. So either it wasn't included here, or perhaps people aren't finding it. So you can get data about that. All right. So one more thing to cover before I get into the actual tips and tricks is a little blurb about Google Tag Manager. So I like to describe Google Tag Manager as the how and Google Analytics as the what. It is not a new version of Google Analytics. It's in fact a separate and complementary piece of software that you can use to control what data gets into Google Analytics. I like to compare it to a remote and a TV. Google Analytics is like your TV. So it's, on your TV, you have all of your programs and shows that appear. You have all your content that you can watch. Just like in Google Analytics, you have all of your data and your reports and charts and graphs. But you have to have a way to control what appears in there. It's not, otherwise, like, how do you find and get the information that you want? And that's Google Tag Manager's role. Just like you can tell your TV, hey, go to Netflix and play Squid Game. I'm updating my references. I was previously always using Game of Thrones here, but it's been off for a while. You can tell it, hey, go to Netflix. I want to stream episode 3 of Squid Game. You can do the same thing with Google Tag Manager, and you can tell it, hey, every time somebody submits that form, or every time someone downloads this report or uses this interactive feature in the report, tell Google Analytics I want to see data about like what page they're on and what topic this report covers and whatever else. So it allows you to control what appears in Google Analytics. It also works with other programs like, Facebook ads. There's also a whole ton of other integrations that are out there that we're just not going to cover today. So just like you might back in the day, when we used to record things on not even the VCR, the DVR, just like back in the day, you might use your remote to tell your TV to record a new episode. This analogy doesn't work so well with all the streaming services. You in Google Tag Manager, right? So back on the TV, you tell it, you give it like a cause, like, okay, every Sunday at 9 p.m. And then you tell it what you want to happen. Play the new episode of Game of Thrones or record the new episode of, I don't know, some sort of show. So we have 2 parts to this statement, the cause and the what happens. So it's the same principle in Google Tag Manager. We have the cause. This is the action that happens. So when somebody submits a form, and then we have the what you want to happen, send an event to Google Analytics. So we got the 2 parts here. So I'm telling you this because I have some examples of how you would need to set up your Google Tag Manager tag and trigger and tag to be able to track a few things about your long form content. Cool. All right. Let me escape out of this and just see real quick if there's any questions about tags and triggers and Google Tag Manager until we get started. Okay, any questions about this? We're good. I know. Awesome, thanks. I swear I'm not that sick. It just is when I start talking, it sounds really bad. All right, of course this happens. All right, I have organized, so I have 3 tips, and they are organized in level of difficulty. So I was thinking if you do want to go back to your office and implement these, like tip number 1 is definitely is gonna be the easiest. Tip 2 is fairly easy, and then tip 3 definitely gets to be a bit more complicated. All right, so number 1, and this is something you could theoretically set up in like a half an hour, is measuring scrolling. So like I said before, out of the box, Google Analytics gives you total page views. So you can see how many people are reading this article about stock trading apps, but you have no idea whether they're like, actually engaging with the content. Are they just loading the page, or are they getting down to 25%, 50%, or even reading to 75 or 90%? And the way you can set this up in Google Tag Manager is to fire an event, so an action to Google Analytics, every time somebody reaches one of these breakpoints. And that allows you to be able to look at individual articles and say, oh, people are scrolling this far in individual articles, compare across articles, see which articles are the most scrolled or read. There's a lot of different types of analysis that you can do. And this has been pretty cool because back in the day, like a year ago, Google Tag Manager, like all Google products, is always changing. And you used to have to get some JavaScript to install in the pages to run this scroll tracking. But these days, Google created a trigger in Google Tag Manager to set this up for you. So you don't have to mess around. There's no coding required. You don't have to go steal some JavaScript off the internet to get this to work for you. So just like our example back here, right, where we have a cause and then we have a tag. So we have a cause, the trigger, and then we have a tag, which is what happens, what you want to do or send. We're going to have the same thing with the Google Tag Manager scrolling. So you can use this scroll depth trigger in Google Tag Manager and tell it, I actually put these in here, 25, 50, 75, 90%. Okay, when people reach these percentage marks down the page, so this is the when, what do you want to happen? Well, I'm going to tell Google Analytics that somebody scrolled to this place on the page. It's going to have to be an event, right? Because it's an action. So this is pretty much right out of the box of Google Tag Manager. No super messing around with this required. I set it up to go on all pages, and it's pretty cool. Now you can suddenly see how far people are getting. I realized that heat mapping, like a hot jar or a crazy egg, can tell you the same thing, but this is free. And I know there's a lot of, like, when I've used that before, right, there's a lot of restrictions on how many different pages it can run on one time, different licensing. So you can easily set this up to run on all pages at all times. Sometimes I do this and people ask me, well, what about people who are scrolling without reading? How do I know that they're actually reading the content? I mean, to be honest, the scrolling is a bit of a proxy metric. But if you are very concerned about people scrolling and not really reading, one thing you can do is there's another type of trigger, new trigger in Google Tag Manager called like a engagement timer. So you can put the two working together and fire events when somebody is scrolling to a certain point on the page and also spending a certain amount of time on the page, and to give you pretty close approximation of how many people are both scrolling and reading, spending time with your content. So I've definitely done that before and set it up to fire like when somebody maybe spends a minute with the content to 50 or 75% of the way through as a stand-in for a read or engagement. lots of options out there, and it's cool because it's just like right out of the box. No, there's Tag Manager can be a like overwhelming piece of software, so this was pretty easy to set up. All right, tip number 2, capturing on-site searches. So the first part of this is even better because it doesn't even require Google Tag Manager. All right, but I like tracking on-site searches. So I'm talking not about SEO searches from Google, but this is rather what people search for when they're on my website, on the client's website. So, and I feel like there's 2 different types of analysis and like actions you can get out of this. If you monitor your searches on your site and you're seeing lots of people searching for content that you already have, I feel like your big takeaway here is, wait, why are they not finding this content? Every time I've done usability interviews, user interviews about searching versus using the navigation, there's a lot of people who say like, I find it, I turn to search. Some people are just search users automatically. Some people first will try the navigation or the homepage and then turn to search. So I think if you're seeing a lot of searches for terms that you feel like are prominently displayed on the site, especially if they're in the navigation, it might be an issue with people not understanding how things are labeled, not being able to find what they're looking for. I think that is a good time to revisit that design and maybe do some additional testing user interviews to figure out what exactly is going on there. On the other hand, if you're getting a lot of searches for content that you don't have, or maybe content that's hidden, this is a good place, good way to get inspiration for what you could be writing about, or content that you might want to surface, like feature on the homepage or feature more prominently somewhere else. I know as a content person, I am always looking for more ideas for content. So I often turn to site search terms as a way to, get ideas that are also data driven, because there are things that, our users are putting out there. All right. So how do you track site searches? A lot of you all might have this set up already. This is really like one of the easier things to do in Google Analytics. My little box here didn't do great, did it? Okay. What you are looking for, this is a feature in the view. So when you have your Google Analytics, you should have an account, a property, and a view. So it's like, I believe this is under the view section of Google Analytics, like the smallest, lowest level. And what you want to look for is to go and do a search on your website and then look for the term that mark, but before the equal sign, and you want to grab that query parameter and put it in into Google Analytics, and Google Analytics will just automatically start tracking your searches. And it has really cool reports about, what's the most searched term, but like also what are people doing after they search? Do they stay on the site? Do they leave? You can get a lot of great data there that's going to be helpful in, crafting your content, and maybe also figuring out whether people are finding what they're looking for. So a couple ideas just from analysis that I've done for other clients. This was back like this time last year. One of my clients is interested in, they're like, oh, we know that our COVID content is getting a lot of use, and we're curious, like, is there something that people are looking for that we're not really covering? So I looked at all the search terms from the previous 6 months and what they all were about in general here. And they, there's a lot of just people looking for COVID stuff in general, as you can see, but they did end up, I think, writing an article about funds and grants available for addressing COVID, because that was really second to just general stuff, the other big thing that people were looking for. So you can definitely do this with your own searches to get an idea of what topics especially around a particular topic people are interested in. Another thing that I recommend doing, and this does require Google Tag Manager. Oh, there we go. Is that I like to track no searches that result in no results. So if you just use the out-of-the-box search tracking reports that Google provides, Google Analytics provides, they are very helpful, but they won't tell you how many search results your page returned. So this is for a e-commerce client, but I think this works for, content people too. You want to know if a lot of people are searching for something and you have nothing about it. I mean, it might be a problem with your search then, but it also might be an opportunity for you to write more content or, update content. So for this, you need Google Tag Manager, and you need to create a trigger and a tag around. You can use in Google Tag Manager, I think a lot of you are pretty familiar with it, right? You can use the visibility trigger to look for this message, like I searched for nothing. Sorry, this is a little confusing, I realize. I have this set up to look for the using the visibility trigger. So when this message, no products were found matching the search criteria, it triggers an event called no search results, and it pulls in this what's in the parameter search query. In this case, it's nothing, and sends that into Google Analytics. So there's a couple of steps here, and if your site works differently than this, which it might very well, you might have to play around with it a little bit. But I find in general a trigger for element visibility, looking for this message that's that's like the no products were found, and then a tag that pulls in what query people were searching for should do the trick. All right, and then tip number 3, this has to do with measuring your content by taxonomy or metadata. And I think that this one is super cool and very helpful. Lots of fun things you can do with this if your definition of fun is analyzing web content. So I think, this is one of my clients. They're a USAID contract, and they are consolidating research for this Momentum project, which has to do with, I believe, maternal and child health in Africa. A lot of like research and best practices. So people in the field sharing their reports that they've put together about what to do. And so they have a bunch of research on their site, and every research article is tagged with a bunch of different things. So they have categories like child health, maternal and newborn health. They have place tags. So this is global, but if it's specific to a country, it might be tagged with that country. Also the languages too, English and French. So especially because they're very interested in research and figuring out how their research is being used and disseminating research, they're particularly interested in this aspect of it. So you can use Google Tag Manager to basically surface all of this data about your research and be able to then pick that up and send that to Google Analytics and get any report that's in Google Analytics to be able to splice it by this metadata. So this uses a feature of Google Tag Manager called the data layer. And if you are going to be doing more with Tag Manager, it's really important to understand what on earth the data layer is. I like to liken it to a spy drop. So what do I mean when I say that? I like to, one of my favorite shows is The Americans. I like to watch spy movies, right? And so drama, you always have the person who, maybe they're a secret agent in Russia and, they've been secretly recording these KGB conversations on this little chip here. They go in, they collect the chip, and then, right, they have to put it somewhere so that their contact can pick it up and send it back to the United States or listen to it and get the information that they need. So they need a place where they can contact each other so that they can exchange this information. In this picture, they are doing it by sticking it inside of a nickel. When I was searching for slides, images for this, I found that there was also people putting information in rats, but I thought I'd spare you all that image and put this one with the nickel with the, whatever this is, little microchip thing or camera chip in it. Anyway, so the idea here is that there's a certain point where we're handing off information. The spy is putting it in this one place so that their handler can pick it up and claim the information. This is the same concept with the Google, with the data layer, is that, we're passing the information from, right, the website, putting it in a place where we can access it with Google Tag Manager and thus Google Analytics. So it's the nickel, it's like the little handoff area, and that's the data layer. So this is what it looks like in Google Tag Manager's what's it called, in Google Tag Manager's debugging interface. You can see that this is another client. They have content about Native American housing. You load the article and you can see all of these different values, including, their taxonomy here. So this is their category, rural and Native American programs. But you can actually, if you want to get creative, work with a developer to push, all sorts of different things into the data layer. So you could do your author name. Like I said, if you have things tagged with language or location or, really anything, any information you have about a piece of content, you can push it into the data layer. If you want to get really creative, you will probably need to enlist a developer, but you can also do these basic things through a Drupal module called, you guessed it, data layer. And I have a link to that at the end of this in a couple of slides. So what can you do with this information once it's in the data layer, right? I didn't put this in here, but basically I'm pulling it out with Google Tag Manager and sending it to Google Analytics as a custom dimension, if you're familiar with Google Analytics. And then I can use that for reporting. So the people over at the USAID contract, they were very interested in using this for reporting because, they get a lot of requests from their people on the ground. So like, they're researchers on specific countries or specific programs wanting to know, hey, what was my most popular content? Or how many downloads did that report get that I put out last week? And so having this makes it a lot easier for them to get that information. They can just come in here in this dashboard that I created in Google Data Studio and search for that, and be able to pull those stats. So it's good for reporting. That's better than having to go, I guess, into Google Analytics and search for URLs tagged with Tanzania. Yeah, actually, I don't even really know how you would manage to get this otherwise. It'd be a big pain. So this is helpful. I always like to look at how you can use things to shape your strategy, like your communications or your content strategy. So I took their data and I just made this lovely chart looking at how topic impacts email sign up. So if this is one of your goals for your site, we're really trying to, increase our email list so we can reach more people, or we're trying to get people to sign up for webinars or for a particular program, you can see if particular topics are more likely to get people to sign up or not, just for example. So we have here on the bottom axis, page views. I don't know what the size is. It's been a little while since I made this. And then email sign up conversion rates. And you can, see here that, even though this was never their intent, we're definitely getting way more signups from people interested in healthcare delivery and healthcare reliance than from, even though it's a very popular topic, this country and global leadership, those people are not signing up for the email. So their goal really is not driving email signups, but if it were, you could see how, this could help you tweak and shape your content over time. Awesome. So if you want to take this back to, a couple minutes here at the end for questions if people have any. So if you do want to take this back and do this at your office, here are basically the resources that you need. If you want to set up Google Tag Manager, I recommend using the Drupal module called Google Tag Manager. Sounds like a lot of people have that installed already. The data layer module that runs, that runs this stuff, that is called data layer. And the data visualization tool is Google Data Studio. That's how I built this thing. And then if you have more questions about Google Tag Manager, I recommend this blog by Simo Ohava. He is like the Google Tag Manager guru and has really great resources detailing how to do all sorts of different cool things in Google Tag Manager, including, I imagine, a lot of this stuff. Awesome. So yeah, we have about 5 minutes. If anybody has any questions or any further ideas, like cool stuff that they did to track their long content, feel free to put it in the chat. Awesome. Okay, so let's see. Where do we find this data in Google Analytics? So if you're using probably I imagine everyone is still on Universal Analytics, like the older classic normal version of Google Analytics. This is all, there's scrolling data. This is all going to be under behavior and then events. So it's kind of buried, and then you'll have to create it's typically organized at first by something called event category. So it's going to be one of the fields of info that you're going to collect, and whoever sets this up for you would call it something like page scroll or scrolling. So you can look in there and see if that's already been set up for your site, Leslie. And if it is, it will be all under that event category. So under behavior and then events. Cool. Awesome. All right. Jeffrey wants to talk about site visitor privacy issues and other products besides Google products. Honestly, I'm very much a Google person. I think it's because I work with government and budget is always a concern, and Google is free. But the other big competitor out there is Adobe and Adobe Analytics. So that's an option. It's going to be, you have to purchase that. The other big players in this space are Snowplow, which is another analytics company. It's very flexible. So I think you're going to run into the same issue where the implementation is going to be involve a lot of effort and a lot more time and money. Google, you can set it up and you do get a lot, even if you don't invest that much time into it. And Segment is also another new player in the area too. So if you sorry, this is Google, very Google biased, but those would be the other ones. There's always a lot of new products, like with anything in tech in this. And with site privacy issues, I mean, obviously, Google doesn't collect any, they definitely, definitely do not allow you to collect any personal information. But we're definitely moving towards the best practice where people are asked to opt into tracking and giving choices about whether they opt in and what they opt into. I mean, I'm sure you all are seeing more and more of those banners appearing on websites. So, and I think like, even if it's not currently required, like if you're designing and launching a new website, that's a best practice for you. I forget, there's a couple of different options there that can help you set that up, like a couple of different software companies that can help you set that up and manage that, which I forget off the top of my head. Oh, and I guess there's questions in the Q&A. Cool. Hold on, let me go there. How do I recommend government orgs measure success? So, I mean, it really depends. That's why I like to put in here about the reading and time on page metric, because I know a lot of organizations, their point is, we want to disseminate this information. We want as many people to know this as possible. We want to increase access to this. And so, knowing that people are, reading your articles, it can be reading your reports and things could be a good measure of success for you. I think that this is something you need to, I can't suggest as an outsider that it has to come like from your own organization. It's like I call it a business decision. So I definitely always tell people to think about their purpose first and then decide on your measurement plan, rather than just pick metrics and then try to retrofit them. Yeah, also Joseph, this is a different Joseph. Joseph's learned late. Yeah, Google, you cannot send PII to Google Analytics. You can get your entire account shut down. Not that I know, speaking for a friend now. So you would not be sending things like, email addresses and stuff. And, certainly with the new opt-in banners, you can give people the ability to opt out of Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager tracking. That is possible to set up in Google Tag Manager, so that when people click to opt in, that's when their tracking starts to fire. So it's something I've only done a couple of times now, but I'm sure I'm going to see more of that implementation going forward. Measuring scrolling, responsive websites, rearrange content by screen size. Content, I have to look into this. I have to say that, yeah, I have gotten some weird result. I used to always use a JavaScript solution, and then I just started with that new trigger. And I do have gotten some weird results where the scrolling looks a bit weird, obviously 25% should have a higher number than 50%, but they were reversed. So I wonder if that's related to this content on mobile or screen size. So it's pretty new and worth experimenting with. I'll have to look into this for you for next time, how it deals with different screen sizes and dynamic content that loads as people are scrolling. I'm not sure. All right, we are at time. But if you have any other questions for me, my email address is right here, emily@bmeasure.com. You can also follow me on Twitter, even though I never tweet. This is the true. This is true confessions about how I work in technology and just downloaded TikTok. But cool. Yeah, thanks so much. It was great presenting for you all, and thanks for putting up with all of the coughing and sniffling. You have a great weekend.